Some feats in sport are so rare that it can take even a lifetime or more of trying to come close or perhaps just about getting better. I'm joined by someone who is a legend of the Olympic movement, someone who won 7 gold medals in swimming at the 1972 Olympics. Mark Spitz, thank you so much for speaking to us. You must have been a very, very tired man after those Munich Olympics.
It's too long ago for me to remember, but I'm sure I was. I mean, it was quite an amazing feat. It took about 8 days to do. And I think I was totally out of gas with the last stroke. Perfect timing.
Perfect timing. But what you did, sir, all those years back was that you raised the bar. It was the Everest of your sport. And was it a heavy mantle to bear?
You know, at the time it didn't seem like it was, and it was at the end of my career, and I basically set out to accomplish winning the events that I currently at that time had the world record in. To do it over an 8-day period of time was quite difficult because you had to remain constantly focused, and physically, of course, I had to be prepared for every day. I had to compete against different athletes each time, and so the challenge was always there. And then when I finished competing, I retired from swimming. So I didn't really have to think about my responsibility to see what I would do the following Olympic Games, which they didn't have professionalism in the Olympic Games back in those days. And I had taken some opportunities after I retired to make some commercial endorsements and licensing agreements, which then would have meant that I couldn't compete even if I wanted to. Of course, today, the rules are different, and I would have been actually encouraged by sponsors to stay in the sport. Like Michael Phelps stayed in probably 2 extra Olympic Games because he was making so much money and the sponsors wanted him to compete. That wasn't what the rules were in those days.
Yes, and because, you know, you retired at the age of 22 and everyone was in a state of shock. Because here comes a man who's gone and won 7 gold medals at the Games, and not just, you know, what is swimming, because you then entered Olympic folklore because for winning those 7, and you know, you joined those pantheon of Olympic greats which, you know, over the centuries, you know, down Jesse Owens, Muhammad Ali and all, and then 7 gold medals, and that remained the golden standard in your sport.
Well, a lot of people don't realize I was actually in the Olympics before in 1968 in Mexico City, where I won 2 gold, a silver and a bronze medal, but they thought I was a loser and I had failed. You know, if I had never gone to Munich, that's still not that bad, winning 2 gold medals, a silver and a bronze. But what really kept me going and focused is that I had lost the gold medals in world record events that I had actually the real strong potential to win, and I was the favorite, and I fell short, and I was miserable about it. So in one sense, I personally felt failure, but if you think about the fact that so many people in the world would say, if you could go to the Olympic Games just to participate, and on top of that win a medal, and it was 2 gold, a silver, and a bronze, would you consider yourself a loser? And of course, I didn't really think of it that way. I just thought that I didn't live up to my potential. So that's provoked me to want to compete, you know, and refocus on what went wrong 4 years before. And then in Munich, of course, it was the culmination of all that hard work and training.
Yes, and if I could just put it in context for you, sir, in India, we won 8 gold medals in hockey, but all these years, we've just won 1 individual gold. And you won 7 on your own. So just to give you a context, you come from a sporting system where Olympic champions are plenty. In our country, an Olympic medalist is put on a pedestal. If you're an Olympic gold medalist, you've got to be wrapped in cotton wool.
You know, I think that with all due fairness, of course, in swimming we have, at the time I competed, 15 different events, and I was in 7 of them, so pretty much half of them I won. But in some sports, like that are team sports, you have to actually go through the whole tournament for the 2 weeks of the Olympic Games to finally become who's the winner. Same in the Winter Olympics, like ice hockey, for an example. So it's impossible for them to come away with just but 1 gold medal. And I think that shouldn't take away from their greatness as well. So each sport has to stand on its own and get recognized for the accomplishments that those athletes make. I guess I might be lucky that my sport has a lot of different individual events, but I don't want to take away from those sports that were team events, because those to me are just as important, and those medals mean the same to them as they do one of my medals. And so I think that I think it's really great that in the Olympic sports, if you can become an Olympian and represent your country, That is one of the greatest honors. If you're good enough to be in the small percentage of those people that come away with a medal, that's even better. And if it's a gold medal, well, then that's really kind of an exclusive group. So I feel part of that exclusive group. Anybody that comes away with a gold medal is in that exclusive group. And one gold medal, or Michael Phelps' 26 gold medals, I think we're all sort of in the same, you know.
Absolutely. But sir, just talking about 72, you spoke very well about how 68 fired you up in that sense, because you went in 68 as well, you thought you could have won 6 as well. That fired you up for 72. But when you keep winning every day, did you have time to soak in that feeling of being an Olympic champion? You spoke so passionately about what it means, but when you win one, then you win one more, then you win one more, at that point of time, did you feel like elated, or you just didn't have the time?
I think that if I started out obviously very well, because I won 1 gold medal, and then on several days I could win 2 gold medals because they had a relay competition. Each day, the responsibility of having to compete in that event was left behind me, so I didn't have to think about that. And so I think that it's sort of a snowball, kind of like rolling down the hill, and eventually it starts to pick up more steam and it gets bigger and larger. And I think that my competitors watched me become really successful. And so if I was going to compete in an event maybe 2 days later, and let's say you happen to be the one that was competing against me, you might be second guessing on whether or not you trained hard enough, or whether or not you rested enough, and whether or not you were in your best shape. And then you're looking at somebody like Mark Spitz, who you've competed against, with saying, well, he's certainly rested enough, and he's certainly trained the proper way, and he's actually in his winning ways, and he's got a lot of positive things going his way. What's that mean for you when you get to the swimming pool and want to swim? Well, in my opinion, I've been told by a lot of experts that a lot of my competitors basically came to the swimming pool wondering who would be first to take second place, not to be first to win, because in the past I had won too many times. So I used that to my advantage, I think, and so it meant that I didn't have to focus on as much of saying, well, am I really prepared? Because I used by example, yeah, I must have been. I broke a world record yesterday. I must have been prepared because I won yesterday. So I used that as a confidence builder for me for each day going forward. And I think that became rather overwhelming for my competitors. And I think Tiger Woods, when he used to go and play golf at his prime, that every time he showed up for the tournament, it was like, oh, he's here. Oh, that means I'm not going to win. Well, maybe I can get second. And I'm not saying that that's bad. It's just that I think that that was the reality of what was really happening.
Yes, it's the aura of a champion. We saw that with Federer at his peak as well. When he went those 5 years, 2003, 2008, where you stepped on court with Federer, you were thinking that, am I going to beat him? Yeah. That's that aura of a champion.
Well, he's having quite a remarkable comeback. I mean, not that he went anywhere, but, he's not finished yet.
Yes. But, sir, you won 9 Olympic gold medals and the silver and the bronze, as you mentioned. But talent alone doesn't get you there. There has to be a lot of work behind the scenes, a lot of training. Did it help you that you came from a system where, Olympic champions are plenty in American sport? You've had this sustained success in swimming as well. Did it help you in that sense that there was a path, or did you chart your own course?
All of the above. I think that I was lucky. I mean, we had a great system in America. As a matter of fact, the system was so great that actually athletes in swimming came from other countries and wanted to participate in some of these athletic programs that we had, especially if they went to college, and the college program helped perpetuate swimming at its finest. And we had a great competition amongst college teams. And so there were swimmers that were from Australia and from England and from Japan that would come and do their education in college. And that helped me and it helped them. But today it's different. A lot of the talent of coaching is now more distributed throughout the world. And so we don't dominate quite as much as we used to. And so there's great performances in men's competition and women's competitions that are coming from Australia and from Japan and elsewhere in other countries. And so there's a great chance that there's going to be a lot of talent. Swimming did something very remarkable. Because of the success that I had in 1972, they basically changed the rules in swimming worldwide through FINA, our organization, that at the Olympic Games, we could only have 2 per country, that you could not have 3 per country. And the reason is that you couldn't sweep the medal stand. So you couldn't get first, second, and third and take all the medals. I'm not sure if we did have 3 participants, we'd still sweep the medal stand. But I think it was a great opportunity to at least have a variety of other people that get a chance to be able to be in the mix of doing well. We used to say in my day that when we had 3 people represent a particular, like say the 100-meter butterfly, if you were first, second, or third at the Olympic trials, you went to the Olympic Games. The 4th place guy, if he was taken, might have actually been able to win, and we left him home. And that might be the case also with other people from other countries. So I think from a spectator point of view, it's more interesting. But that's for swimming. I know that in other sports, they do have 3 and 4 people. In gymnastics, they can have 3 or 4 people, and therefore you could actually sweep the medal stand. Even Americans could do that, but swimming has actually not allowed that to happen anymore.
I think shooting also, per event, there is 2, I think shooting as well. But just that final moment, sir, it perhaps helped you also that final race of yours was a relay, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
It was the relay, and you weren't the last to swim. You gave your team the lead. I think it was a close race at that point of time. What did you feel when you touched down and finally the gold came again? It was 7, and you had actually thought of going for 6, and you weren't too keen about the 7th, but it happened. So were you exhausted? Did you climb out of the pool thinking, I've done it? Was it exhilaration, exuberance, or just, thank God it's over?
Well, that's a very good question and a great observation, and I think that at the end of the day, I'm happy that I did swim in a relay. It took a little bit of the responsibility off my shoulders, although I did have my own responsibility because I represented 25% of what needed to be done, swimming my leg. But the other 75% was spread out between the other guys. Now, our discussion was, please don't make a false start. Don't jump in before you're not supposed to, because the whole relay would be disqualified. Not only will you not get a gold medal, but they were saying, you know, we'll mess up your opportunity to get 7 gold medals. And so there was a tremendous amount of pressure, but we were favored to win, and we came through, and that's exactly what happened.
But feeling of exhilaration, or? Oh
yeah, I mean, certainly. I mean, there was.
You don't need to go jumping up and down.
Let's put it this way: I wasn't disappointed. It was over. I was disappointed. I would have been disappointed had the result not been as successful. But having that success, I was looking forward to it. You know.
You know, sir. Munich is remembered for 2 things. It's remembered for your remarkable achievement, but it's also remembered for what happened in the Olympic Village and with the Israeli athletes. And since then, everyone I've spoken to say that the Olympics lost the innocence in '72. Would you look at it that way?
I think there was a lot of things that came from the '72 Olympic Games, and one of those, as you just explained, they sort of lost their innocence. I'm not so sure that the Olympic Games was innocent, but I think that the Olympic Games since 1972 has had a different direction, and one primarily is to protect the athletes. Number 2 is to protect the spectators. Number 3, the press, and everybody else involved that is involved in the Olympic movement. And they've done a great job since then without incident, and I think that that's important to make a recognition thereof. But the responsibility of a host city is even that much more paramount. That, I mean, just the cost of not only hosting and making sure that the venues of competition are completed and right for the athletes, but also the responsibility of all the security that's involved. And so it's a monumental task.
You were the star of those games, and you had to leave immediately because it happened overnight when you won your 7th gold. You were taken off to London, I was told, yes. And you were surrounded by armed guards. You perhaps would have hoped that, you know, the situation would have been better. You would have been in the village, and the various other athletes who were there, they would have come and, you know, enjoyed your success as well. Those were troubling times. Did you fear for your life at any point of time?
Never feared for my life. First of all, I was leaving anyway because I was going back to dental school. And so you're right, I didn't have the chance to rejoice and hang out, you know, for the next following week of athletic competition and go to see track and field or gymnastics or anything else for that matter. So I was going anyway. But you're right, I mean, I didn't get a chance to think about it. I was whisked away, but those were interesting times, and we dealt with it in the way we only knew, and there was so much uncertainty. We have a lot more certainty today as to provisions that, gosh, for sake, something were to happen tragically at the Olympic Games, there's already programs that are, I'm sure, implementing what do we do with the athletes, what do we do with everybody else, and where do we go, and how do we deal with basically terrorism. I mean, I think that there's a lot of people that have spent a lot of time and energy of figuring out what those steps might be. There was nothing of that in place at that time in 1972. It was sort of winging it, if they say.
Yeah. Since 72, and you retired at your peak, since 72, every Olympics, everyone just spoke about your record. 7 golds, is it going to be possible? I think Matt Biondi went for it in 88 as well, couldn't happen. Did you breathe a sigh of relief when the record finally went in Beijing, or were you a bit upset within that, oh, it's gone?
You know, it's funny you just asked that question, because I've been asked that many times. I think that when you think about Michael Phelps trying to break my record, and he tried it at several different Olympics, every time you were to talk to Michael Phelps before he broke Mark Spitz's record, it was, you're trying to break Mark Spitz's record. Are you going to break Mark Spitz's record? When is Mark Spitz's record going to be broken? And unfortunately for him, every time his name was mentioned, my name was dragged into that situation. So the moment that he broke my record, he got set free. Think about it. He got set free. So now he can talk about himself, and rightfully so. And in one sense, I got set free. I got set free that now somebody else who I became the model for now has accomplished something even greater. And therefore, in one sense, we both got set free. We got sort of separated from each other, you know, in conversation. And he went on, obviously, to even accomplish even more. And my records actually then became more identifiable. And that was, hey, records truly are meant to be broken. And he went and he was able to do that. And as my mom and my mother used to say all the time, don't complain about a horse race you're not in. And I was never in his horse race, you know, because my horse race was in 1972 and his horse race was 36 years later. So, but
different times,
but it's a different, yeah, exactly. So I think that there was a liberation of the two of us in a real positive way. You know, could have I sat around and said, oh, well, I wish he didn't break my record? No, not really. Because, listen, what I did stood at the time and was recognized as what it was, for what it was. And the beauty of that is, you're talking to me now.
I wasn't been born.
That's right. And my record has been broken by many years. And I have to commend you personally. I mean, of all the interviews I've ever done, you have the best background of everything that has happened to me, of any person that I've ever talked to. You're quite knowledgeable about the Olympics and the sport and my career, and I want to thank you for that. That was just been marvelous.
Thank you, sir. I just won an Olympic gold from the great Mark Spitz.
Seriously. Please don't edit this out.
I'm not editing this out. This is going to be there, you know, on my epitaph. But, you know, sir, because of the comparisons, the 7 or the 8, there were inevitable comparisons. I'm just going to ask you a different question. Now, this talk of were you better, were his better, I'm going to go rephrase that question. How are you both different as swimmers?
Well, I didn't have anybody to model myself after, and he probably looked at what I had done, and I don't know whether he really modeled himself after me, and I don't think he really did, because he swam some of the same events, but then he had other events that I didn't compete in. And so he had a different approach based on his strengths. I mean, I was once in a seminar, and it's very interesting. This was before Michael Phelps became Michael Phelps, and this was probably back in, oh, I guess, 2000. I don't even know if he had even gone to his first Olympics. And it was comparing Muhammad Ali as the greatest boxer in the world with Joe Louis, somebody that came before him, or Johnny Weissmuller and Mark Spitz, or Matt Biondi. And everybody had their own opinion as to, you know, what identifies greatness and comparisons. And what I said was this, is that, and I say this about Michael Phelps, and I say this about any situation, What made me great was my total understanding of my competitors, who they were, what they did, what they ate, and how they trained. And I made it a point to understand their weaknesses. I made it a point to understand their strengths. And I, when I competed, always made it my job, my ability to be able to do one less mistake than they did and be one more day prepared than them. And therefore, it was a habit of mine to make sure that my preparations had that advantage over them. And so, because I knew everything of what made me great and what made them weak, I built my strengths on. That is exactly the same thing that Michael Phelps did with the people he competed against. And that's the same thing that Tiger Woods would do with those people that he competed in, so that everybody that came to a tournament that Tiger Woods was in golf, for an example, that everybody came to see who would be first to get second place. So with that being in mind, if he and I, theoretically, either I go back into his time, advance myself to his time, or he were to come back into my time, and we would compete with each other. Since he knew the formula, my solution to the formula would be we would have to tie. There could not be a winner, because he would know exactly the same focus points that made me great, which also made him great, and therefore we would have to tie. So in this conversation that I had with the moderator said, "No, I disagree with you." And I said, "Okay, why is that?" He said, "Because he only learned how to win by hundredths of a second. You learned how to win by seconds. So therefore, you knew how to win against your competitor by a couple of seconds. He only knew how to do it by hundredths. I would bet that you would win over him." And I go, "My wife loves you. Thank you very much."
But just what Phelps achieved, in the sense, the number, as you said, he kept coming back and nobody could come close. He kept winning those golds. Has he raised the bar so high that it's going to be difficult to get past the number of gold medals, be it, say, 9 if it's an individual Olympics, or those 23 golds that he won? It can only happen in 2 sports. It can either happen in swimming or it can happen in gymnastics. In no other sport can you win that many medals.
Okay, so here's my answer to that. I don't know. If I knew the true answer to that, then I should have a real important job in Washington, D.C., like maybe be the president, because I would be able to tell you what the future holds, in store for everybody. I would say that here's my philosophy to that. If asked me, can somebody win 7 gold medals right after 1972, and I was asked that, I'd go, "Oh, absolutely." But I would have thought in my own mind they would have to do it sort of the way I did, for one reason. In that in 2 of my events, the 100 and 200 meter freestyle, those were also the same events in 2 of the relays of the 3. So if I was the greatest in the world in those 2 events, like the world record holder, then I have a strong possibility of winning the gold medals in those. Then I would also contribute the most to my relays, because I also swam those same legs. So you'd have to be the 100 and 200 meter freestyler, which then theoretically would give you 4 gold medals. Then you would have to dominate another event, which would be another stroke. And so I did, the 102 meter butterfly. Phelps did it a little bit differently. He was not the dominant factor in the 100 meter freestyle. He was not the fastest man, but he was the fastest man in the 200 meter freestyle. And he was the fastest man in the 100 and 200 meter butterfly, so that was 3 gold medals. And then he did swim a very credible leg in the 100 freestyle, so he was on the relay. And then he was in the medley relay, and then he was in the individual medley swimmer, which at one time I was in high school, but not at the world level that he was. So then he won the individual medley. And he was also a tremendous accomplished backstroke swimmer. So with that being in mind, there's a lot of possibilities of somebody in the future to be able to do that, mixed into the fact that the schedule of events have to be in a way where your specialty is not actually competing on the same day in 3 of those events because you need the rest. That would actually inhibit you with the possibilities of actually being successful. So there's a combination of not only the events that you're in, but are they swum 2 of those events or 3 of them in the same day would make it almost impossible to win 9 gold medals. So you would have to figure out what the schedule is, or they would have to change the schedule for somebody that had the potential to do that, knowing that somebody was that good 3 or 4 years out. FINA would have the ability to be able to change the schedule in the order of days of the 8-day program to make an accommodation for that person to want to do that. So there's a lot of things that could make the reason why it was possible or make the reason why it was impossible. And when you start to swim like in more than 7 or 8 events, there will be multiple events on a day, and on top of that, you have to also swim the semifinals, maybe in the morning or even in the evening events before. And if the semifinals were swum before, that would take away your energies from swimming in the finals at night. Thank goodness for Phelps, they knew that. He was allowed to swim his finals first and the semifinals later, which was easier for him to then make the finals the following evening. It sounds like it's very complicated, and it is. It is possible.
It is possible. Well, it took 36 years, sir, for your record to be eclipsed, but I don't think we can perhaps wait another 36 more years. But one thing is there. Records are meant to be broken. Records will come, records will go. But as my dad kept telling me stories while growing up, there's only one Mark Spitz. Thank you so much, sir, for this lovely interview.
Thank you.